of what we misunderstand about their behavior is actually just biology. Let me explain. So first, teens are wired for rewards. They're drawn to things that feel exciting, not because they're reckless, but because this is how their brains learn. If we want better behavior, we have to build in motivation, not just punishment. Second, teens learn best by doing. They crave real-world experiences, not just lectures in the classroom. They need opportunities to try, to mess up, to reflect, and then to try again. And third, peer pressure is real, but adults still matter too. And teens crave guidance, connection, and coaching. Our presence is a powerful intervention in their lives. So instead of blaming teens for being too difficult, we should be building systems that align with how they learn, grow, and thrive. Learning this science was a game changer for me more than a decade ago, especially because I had a preteen at the time. It gave me a whole new lens for understanding what she was going through, and honestly, what I was going through as a parent and what I might do better. And when young people learn their brain science and what's going on in their own development, it's really powerful. They begin to have more empathy for themselves and for those around them. But fair warning, they might also use that science against you. My daughter had a forward-thinking biology teacher who taught her about brain science, and every time she didn't do something I asked her to do, she would say, "But my prefrontal cortex isn't done yet." And I said, "It might not be, but you can still do your homework." She is not wrong. It is hard to argue with science. But when I became president of the Casey Foundation, I knew we had to improve the ways that we served adolescents across all of our work, from child welfare and juvenile justice to education and job training. And so together we developed something called Thrive by 25, which is our commitment to ensure that all young people ages 14 to 24 have their basic needs met, like food, housing, and health care, that they have relationships with caring adults, that they have opportunities to learn and earn, and support to learn how to manage their money, and chances to lead in their communities. You can think about all these essentials as really the cables that hold up that bridge that adolescents are walking across. And I learned a lot about this work just by talking to young people, and they really impacted how we put this framework together. At first, we didn't have a focus on basic needs as a part of this framework. We were thinking about all the aspirations we wanted and that young people had told us they had for themselves. But then I talked to a young man who said he had recently watched his best friend die from gun violence, and he had never really recovered from that trauma. And he said, if you don't bake in supports for mental health and other basic needs, we are not going to be able to thrive. We'll just be focused on trying to survive. And so that moment really crystallized something for us, that we have got to have that as a core pillar of what we're going to do, because stability is the floor. It's not the ceiling of what we want young people to have. So when we marry these 5 essentials with the insights of brain science and use policy as a lever to scale them, incredible things can happen. So how do we put this into practice? Let me give you a few examples. The first comes from Casey's Center for Economic Opportunity. We have all heard about the concerns that Gen Z as they enter the workplace, from rising unemployment rates to questions about their productivity and communication styles. Well, the economic headwinds they are facing are real. Many young people are really struggling to find jobs, not because they don't want to work, but because the pathways in have narrowed. Entry-level jobs are disappearing. So for many young people, especially those from low-income and disinvested communities, that first step into a job feels really out of reach. That's why we need to build more on-ramps and grow the runways. Give young people clear, supported ways to get in the door and then help them build momentum once they're there. So one of the biggest insights from the science and from talking to young people is that they learn best by doing. They want guides to help them learn how to be successful. That's why we need to give young people hands-on experience and workplace mentorship, especially during the ages of 14 to 24, when their brains are developing better judgment, planning, and impulse control. The workplace is a great place for them to learn those skills. Those early opportunities are really essential. And here's what I know. Young people want to work, and many of them have to work, not just for themselves, but for their entire family. They need to help cover rent, groceries, healthcare bills, so the stakes are really high for them. Just look at summer job programs all across the country. Most cities host a summer jobs program. And thousands of young people show up looking for a job, but there is never enough to meet the demand. In Baltimore, where I live, 13,000 young people showed up for a job this summer, and we only had 8,500 opportunities. So you can't tell me young people don't want to work. They are showing up in droves trying to get opportunities. Well, that's why we are investing in an effort called a Partnership to Advance Youth Apprenticeship, or PIA. It gives high school students paid work experience during the school year. It gives them new skills and a chance to earn college credit, and it is getting great results. PIA has prepared more than 2,400 young people across the country for high-paying careers in manufacturing, healthcare, and hospitality. And why is PIA so successful? It's because it reflects how young people like to learn. It allows them to earn money, to meet their basic needs, a huge motivator, and it exposes them to new career paths and mentors. What's not to love about that? This isn't charity, this is a strategy. When we design apprenticeships, internships, and early job programs that combine skill building with coaching, we don't just prepare young people for the future, we help them see themselves in the future as independent, thriving adults. Well, the second example I want to give you comes from our child welfare work. There are about 400,000 young people in foster care every year who, for some reason, various reasons, aren't able to live safely with their families. And we assume that when these kids are removed from their homes, that they're going to be either reunited with their birth families, adopted, or get a legal guardian. But that's actually not true for all kids, especially those who enter the system as teenagers. And about 20,000 young people every year age out of the foster care system without a permanent family. Nobody to help them find their first apartment or buy their first car. Nobody that they can ask questions when they're trying to figure out what their first job could be, all the things that a family provides. Kids need a parental figure to support them throughout all stages of their physical, mental, and emotional development. And this single factor, the presence of at least one committed parental figure, is game-changing. It can have ripples throughout a young person's life. And without that, they are left to fend for themselves, putting them at much greater risk for poor outcomes and even exploitation. Youth who age out of foster care face much higher rates of homelessness, joblessness, early parenthood, and substance abuse. So we don't want this. And we wanted to figure out what we could do as an organization to help change that. So we gathered a group of young people that you see on this slide, and what they did was create something called the Soul Family Framework, which stands for support, opportunity, unity, and legal relationship. It allows young people over the age of 16 to choose a group of unrelated adults who care about them to be their legal guardians. Maybe it's a mentor, a coach, and a neighbor. And they work together to support that young person for the rest of their life. This framework, foster youth themselves designed this framework, and they advocated for it to become law in Kansas. The whole process from sort of development to implementation was something around 2.5 years. It was really pretty spectacular what these young people were able to do. And now a group of other states and jurisdictions are using this as a model to improve permanency rates in their own states. This is important because we never outgrow the need for family. And Soul Family has done so much more than create a permanent family for these young people. It has shown what happens when we allow young people to lead. The third example I want to talk about comes from our juvenile justice work. Despite what the headlines might suggest, less than 1% of all young people ever end up in the juvenile justice system. The vast majority of crime across the country is not juvenile crime, and the vast majority of juvenile crime is not violent crime. And when young people do cause harm, they should absolutely be held accountable, but how we hold them accountable matters greatly for a system that is supposed to be designed to rehabilitate young people and put them back on a path to success. Because here's what research tells us. Most young people who commit a crime won't do it again. Adolescent behavior is often impulsive and shaped by peer influence. And it doesn't mean that a young person is beyond help. It means they need structure and support and somebody in their corner to get them back on track. But harmful narratives are painting young people as threats, and that's leading to punitive legislation that does more harm than good. So what's a better path? Let me introduce you to opportunity-based probation. In most juvenile systems, when a young person gets in trouble, probation is typically the intervention that's used. It's really a long list of conditions that young people have to comply with the constant threat of incarceration if they don't comply, even though they might not be any risk to safety. But that approach completely ignores all the things I've just told you about adolescent development. As I shared earlier, teens are motivated by rewards, and they don't always have the ability to think long-term about consequences. And their brains aren't wired to follow a complex set of rules over and over and over again. So typical probation, which is full of must-dos and don'ts, actually isn't set up to allow young people to succeed. That's why we work with the juvenile justice systems and community partners in Tacoma, Washington, to design a new kind of model. In opportunity-based probation, teens earn points for reaching goals and demonstrating positive behavior. And they can exchange those points for rewards like movie tickets, job shadowing opportunities, or reduced check-ins with their probation officer. And the results are actually remarkable. Youth and opportunity-based probation model has 67% fewer probation violations than those who are in the regular form of probation. And confinement based on rule-breaking behavior declined by 52%. 52%. Why? Because this approach is aligned with what we know about adolescent brain science, not against it. It provides structure, support, and motivation, the exact ingredients most young people need to get back on track. That's why 24 sites across 12 states are using these kinds of developmentally appropriate strategies. So PIA, SOUL, and opportunity-based probation are just some of the ways we at the Casey Foundation are applying the adolescent science to equip young people with the Thrive by 25 essentials. And the exciting thing is that these strategies can be implemented at the state and local level, and we see lots of momentum there, even as things are more challenging on the federal level. There are many ways that we can help our young people grow into the adults that they are meant to be and that our communities need them to be. But the operative word in all of this is we. Casey Foundation can't do this work alone. It's going to take all of us, from families to employers to nonprofits and policymakers, all of us thinking of ourselves as bridge builders for young people. Policymakers in the room, you have the power to take what works and scale it. Whether it's youth apprenticeships, innovative probation models, or new pathways to permanency, these strategies exist, they are proven, they're ready, and they just need your leadership. And to the advocates, you are natural storytellers. You can help communities and constituents understand why these kinds of preventative and powerful strategies matter. You can make the science real through the lives and voices of the young people that you serve. That's why it's so important to engage them in understanding the dimensions of the problems that they face and that you're working on, their ideas about solutions, and their feedback on the services. They know best what they are up against. As I said, we got 48 million adolescents right now crossing this bridge, and we've got the research, the stories, and the strategies to help them succeed. What we need now is the will and the coordination to move together. That's why I wrote my new book, Thrive, to change the way that we see and we serve young people. Adolescence is such a critical window of opportunity to help young people grow into the successful adults they can be and to prevent future problems. Our young people do not need the pessimism that we read about in the headlines every day. Instead, we need to be working to create a sense of purpose and possibility in their lives. This will give them the confidence to know who they are and where they are going. And in my opinion, that's every sense of the definition of the word thrive. Thank you. Well, I've heard that we have time for a few questions if folks want to ask any about my remarks or the book. or Casey's work. If we want to start with the gentleman over here with the mic. Oh, he's the hander out. Okay, got it.
Thank you. That was a wonderful presentation that inspired me professionally and personally as a parent of teens. So my question is, when you talk about soul, what has been, if any, of the pushback that you received about creating this alternative permanency option for youth, which I agree is very important?
Yeah. It passed with bipartisan support, which rarely happens in these days. I think people realized we didn't have any solution to help these young people. I think the technicalities folks wanted to work through was, how were these legal rules going to work for unrelated people to be decision makers and so a support system for young people. And we worked through those complexities. Part of what young people wanted was not to have to sever their relationship with their biological families, which is what adoption requires. Even though their parents might not be able to take care of them, that doesn't mean they want to forever sever having a relationship with them. And it also severs relationships with their siblings, and they often aren't placed with their siblings. And so they also didn't want to legally forever not be related to the siblings that they had. So that was part of what we were trying to sort through, was how to resolve the sort of legal complexities of unrelated individuals and maintaining the biological bonds that were really so important to young people, and not forcing them to give up some of their post system benefits they might have, like the opportunity to get college or other resources paid for. So those were some of the complexities. But we've got on our website, if you Google SOUL, you can see a case study about the process and these amazing young people who came together to do this. There's a question down here.
Hi, Lisa. Thank you so much for that.
Of course.
That was really wonderful, and I'm excited to read your book. I'm Rachel. I'm with Children's Rights. And I trained, my graduate work was in parenting research, and especially sort of a niche in fatherhood research and the ways that fathers contribute to their children's positive development. So I was curious, and I know Annie Casey does some fatherhood programming work and some research into that. I was just curious, your thoughts about the role of mothers and fathers in terms of the period of adolescence, and maybe also like from a policy perspective. I've seen sometimes like fathers are left out of these conversations around like childhood policy, so I was just curious your thoughts about that.
Awesome. One of the programs that we have piloted, we brought it from Canada actually, is a program called Connect. And a lot of young people go into the foster care system because of parental-child conflict, not because of child abuse or neglect, but they just aren't getting along in this period. And this program, Connect, is a, I think, 10-week program that enables families to really work on the root causes of conflict and learn how to communicate with one another better. And one of the pilot programs we've been doing in Atlanta is with non-custodial fathers often in barbershops, and are using it as a tool for them to learn how to build stronger relationships with their adolescent children. And it has been remarkable. I went down to Atlanta, which is where I'm from, and met with those fathers. And it is so important for us to make sure that a caring adult can be of any gender, and it's absolutely important that we make sure that young people are connected to their all the adults who are available in their lives, and certainly to fathers, even if they aren't custodial parents. So yes, we agree, very important.
It's a privilege. There's someone over here, but I want to ask the question.
How are
Hey,
you?
Lisa. Thank you so much for being here. Thanks for your sharing, and thanks for writing the book. Our kind of theme the last couple of days is that it's time to read books. Like, this is time for reading books. So you met us at the right time. I want to say publicly something I said privately in the sense of asking my question, which is thank you, because you were remarkable counsel to CDF staff and board as we made our transition a number of years ago, helping us to think about the full landscape for child well-being and youth advocacy in ways that we might meet the moment. As you have reflected in writing the book, and you think about this moment across the landscape, specifically for those of us who work in this field of child advocacy. Last time I was at NEKC, I was with partners you all were convening from the Partnership for America's Children. So you all support networks in this work. What are some of the things that you're sharing with your institutional partners, kinds of organizations that are represented here today, about how we might be responsive to this moment, given your deep reflection in writing the book?
Well, thank you. First, let me say it's such an honor to see your leadership in action and to support the work of CDF and all of your amazing networks. So it's our honor. Thank you for allowing us to partner with you. And you know, I think you're the bomb. So it is a pleasure. I would say two simple things in this moment. One, we got to work on narrative. I think we often get so mired in the details of the policy that we forget how powerful storytelling is. Policymakers are just people, and so often they are influenced by one powerful anecdote, and that anecdote doesn't have anything to do with the data about what is going on with kids and families. It's one person who had one experience and one set of challenges, and then we end up with policies that don't address the bulk of what we're trying to help young people accomplish. So the first thing I would say is we got to get our storytelling game up, that we've got to put more stories about real people, real families, real challenges into the policy-making landscape. And I'm not saying that we're not doing it, but I'm saying we got to get our narrative game up to like a 10 out of 10 is something I say. The second thing I say is that I think we are often frustrated by the federal policy landscape, and state and local, they are doing something every day. Like, that's where the game is. And I don't think and you get enough states on the right landscape, that's a national strategy. Who cares what the federal policy is if you got all the states going in the right direction? That's really Casey's approach. And everything that we do, we invite state and local partners to pilot programs with us, to figure out the financing flows. Like, we are risk capital for them that they can't use public dollars for to try to make things work. And there isn't an initiative that we invite states or jurisdictions to participate in where we don't get dozens and dozens of states, Republican and Democratic states. I'm working with all kinds of states all over the country who want to do better by kids. And so I would just say, while the federal game is important, we know that has national reach, you can get a long way at the state and local level working with folks you might not necessarily think you could work with, who are every day determined to try to do better by the kids and families in their community. So get our narrative game up and do not ignore the state and local landscape. There's something going on. There is a lot going on there. Yeah, each of the things I talked about today, they're done on the, on the state or the county level, and they're very competitive. If they see one doing it, all of them want to do it because they want their data to look good too. So use the power of competition to get our states aligned. And before you look up, you have 35, 40 states, which we have in many initiatives. You're almost to, a whole nationwide strategy or something. That's what gives me hope.
Hi, Lisa. Great to see you.
Hey, how are you?
Anna Jinkerson,
Hey, Anna.
Living Cities.
Hey.
Definitely a fangirl of yours, and thank you for all you do on our board of directors. And Joe Scantleberry says hello.
I saw him last night. I had a book event in Baltimore, and he was there. So
yes, I was at the gala, and we had the DMV covered last night, so that was good. And I'm kind of taking this question, I don't know if I should take it this way, but a different direction. And I guess I'm speaking as a citizen of the DMV. I live in Virginia, but, really deeply care about DC. Janine Pirro is calling on Congress to change the law so people as young as 14 who are charged with violent crimes are prosecuted by her office instead of DC Family Court. This is obviously very troubling. And what do you think the solution is? Like, how can is it getting back to that block by block community organizing and that intentional community to counteract this really harmful narrative? Because she's using a local crime and then trying to roll it into the federal system, and I think most of us here would agree that that's incredibly harmful. So do you have any suggestions for us just as citizens, as we're just trying to deal with the onslaught of these really harmful juvenile policies that are currently happening in our neighborhoods?
Well, the Casey Foundation is probably the largest funder of juvenile justice in the country, juvenile justice reform. We have more than 300 jurisdictions that partner with us on juvenile justice issues, and so we get to see what's happening in lots of places around the country. And I'll say we've been here. I mean, Casey has supported efforts for a long time that have gotten us up to, raise the age legislation all across the country. And the sense I get from all of these jurisdictions, and my end is 300, that they don't want to go back on the policies that they are implementing. I talked about things like opportunity probation, like they are trying to continue to do things that help young people get back on track, not implement things that are more punitive for young people. We and our grantees continue to talk about what the science says is right for kids, talk about positive impacts of what is happening, but the anecdote that never ceases to be compelling in lots of spaces. So all I can tell you is that the juvenile justice field is strong, people on the ground who are doing the work, and they are not at all interested in going back to a place where the age of jurisdiction is lower than 17, and so I remain hopeful that these folks are extraordinary partners for us with their legislators in trying to prevent those kinds of policies from being reinstated. We've come a long way over the last 25 years. We don't need to retreat in what is working better. Juvenile crime is vastly reduced over the last 25 years. It's certainly not non-existent, but it is reduced because we've been using smart strategies that have been reducing incarceration while also really helping young people get on track.
Thank you so much for your remarks. My name is Elisa Minoff. I work at the Center for the Study of Social Policy.
Like all our grantees are in the room.
So I appreciated specifically the point you made that it was talking to young people that led you to lift up basic needs in your framework. And I was curious what you see as some of the most promising innovations in economic supports for young people at the state and local level as we've kind of failed to move the needle at the federal level.
Yeah, one of the projects we are working with is the Student Basic Needs Coalition. It is, there's, massive basic needs and stability for young people who are pursuing higher education. And they are using peers to help young people navigate the safety net. And it is generating millions of dollars in benefits to help these young people stay in school and accomplish their goals. Again, happening at the grassroots level, school by school, peers helping peers, not a high-cost model that is opening doors to young people to get them where they need to go. I think there's also tremendous opportunity in the future around using AI. I mean, I think we're all really worried about the perils of AI, but there can also be some benefits. And in the safety net system, where it's a bunch of complex rules that change all the time and your personal circumstances determine where cliffs lie for you, I think that's a great use of AI, and we have a number of grantee partners who are trying to figure out how we can do like rapid re-enrollment as, new Medicaid rules take effect. How can we not let that be a cliff for people if they don't know how to navigate the re-enrollment process? So I would say sort of two things that are looking promising to me are these sort of grassroots peer navigation methods and using technology to help us enable people to better navigate the safety net.
Good afternoon.
Hi.
I'm John Stanford, State Director for CDF Ohio.
Great.
And I love what you had to say about storytelling and upping our narrative game to make changes happen. And I think one of the things that I've seen over this year in the last several months is that it appears as though the philanthropic community is really concerned about what's happening at the grassroots level and being able to provide services to people, with everything that's going on at the federal government level. Is that something that you see as happening, and how difficult is it going to be for us to continue to do storytelling, building narratives, and doing policy work when there seems to be this
When they're trying to
push?
survive.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you think back 30 years ago, there were many nonprofits. They weren't necessarily well resourced, but they were able to do amazing things that changed the trajectory of this country. I'm not at all making the case that people don't deserve resources. What I'm saying is people are really creative. And we have about 900 grantees across the country. We are listening intently to see where are the soft spots because of federal funding cuts. The data infrastructure for the country, wobbly. The community violence, juvenile justice space, lots of funding cuts in that space. And now we're seeing, lots of safety net programs be destabilized. We have done what we can to try to help shore up grantees as best we can, focusing on the spaces that have suffered some of the biggest cuts and have the fewest number of funders. In a space like juvenile justice, it's like 2 people in town. So if we don't step up to help that ecosystem, it's going to be in peril, whereas there are many more education funders, and we could allow others to take the lead in those kinds of spaces. But we are funding direct support for organizations that might be financially unstable. We are supporting technical assistance. Many organizations are thinking about merging or doing different kinds of fundraising. We've supported technical assistance. We've joined funding pools in many cities. They're trying to shore up their nonprofit sector, and so we've contributed to citywide nonprofit stabilization funds that are helping them do that. And then most recently, as Head Start dollars became in jeopardy, we stepped in to help Head Start agencies in Atlanta stay open because we knew that was going to be a big crisis for families there. We are not unique in the ways we're trying to step in and help. You hear organizations like Mellon that are trying to help the arts community. Like, we're all trying to figure out how we can be helpful, but it is a sort of multi-pronged approach because different organizations need different things. But the good thing, I'm not hearing lots of organizations close. I'm seeing lots of organizations reimagine, and that's what I would like to see. Well, I see that my timer is down to 0. I am grateful that I had the opportunity to spend a little time with you all this afternoon. Thank you so much for sharing my book with your audience. I hope that we all leave here thinking of ourselves as the best bridge builders we can be, so that we can make sure that the millions of young people who need our support and encouragement get it. Thank you.